In the coaching world, just because somebody's a great marketer does not make them a great coach. And I see these armchair quarterbacks that I say all the time where they're asking people to do something that they've never been willing to do themselves. That would be, maybe that's a myth. Maybe it's just my biggest pet peeve. I met three relationship coaches this last weekend, and none of them were actually in relationships currently, but they're coaching everyone else how to do it. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. So I guess what I would say is because I love coaching, I think coaching is important, but I would ask people to really dig into who these people are. Like the reason I can talk about helping businesses because I built and sold three already. I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't done myself or I'm not doing currently. So maybe that's a myth. It's certainly a pet peeve of mine.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, J.M. Ryerson. And JM started his or is going to be talking about a few things, including how winning comes from the self, and also talking a little bit about self-development and self-belief, probably even backing up a little bit and talking about what is the self, and then how to fill your energy bucket each day, and how to love yourself as well. So it should be a great conversation, and definitely looking forward to it. And with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, JM.
Devin, good to see you as always, brother. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, man, it's always a blessing to be talking to you.
Hey, absolutely. Excited to have you here and looking forward to a great discussion. So, well, I just gave kind of an introduction and overview of about a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. But before we dive in, for those that maybe didn't catch your inventive journey episode, and definitely encourage the audience to, if you haven't had a chance to go and check out his episode there, that's our sister podcast. Definitely I encourage you to do so. But for those that are just meeting you for the first time or looking for a quick refresher, take a minute or two and just introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, brother, thanks. So J.M. Ryerson, Let's Go Win is my fourth company that I've had the chance to grow and build. And so the first three companies built and sold, that was cool. And then I actually wrote a book for my wife, and I have two sons, called Let's Go Win. And that company has grown and ideated and iterated into several different things. But really, what I do on a daily basis is my goal and my job, and what I get up out of bed for is to inspire people to live their best lives. So I work with businesses to help double their revenue, double or triple their revenue in the first year. I do three things: sales, leadership, building teams. And somebody kept asking me this question over and over. They're like, what is winning? Because you have the name of your company's Let's Go Win. And so I started doing more research on it, because putting your finger on what winning is, it's kind of a tough thing. Yeah, you could have wins or losses, but what is winning? And what's fascinating to me, Devin, every time I looked that definition up, you would see one word that came back to me every single time. It said self-development, self-love, self-belief, self-growth. The word self is in the definition of every winning thing that I can find. And so I thought, okay, that's cool. What the heck is self? And that's what I've just really been spending a lot of time on recently, because I love helping the companies double their revenue. That's awesome. But what I'm really passionate about is helping people show up as the best version of themselves so they can be the best employer, employee, son, daughter, father, whatever hat that they're wearing. And so that's the world that I've just been really focused on, is how to help people understand what the heck self is. How can we pour into ourselves so we show up as the best version. So it's been a cool ride, man. Just helping companies make a lot of money and helping them, live their best lives, and that's what I get to do every day.
All sounds like definitely a fun thing to focus on and a fun business to be in. So, no, kind of now diving into the topic at hand, and that was a great or segue or setup to it. But kind of one of the initial things that it probably would make sense to do, as you mentioned, is self comes up a lot. Kind of walk us through, how do you define yourself? Now, I get self. You could be, when you're referring to it, you're referring to the individual maybe, but on a lot of contexts that you mentioned, I think while people may have kind of a general idea or general understanding a bit of what self is, to your point, I think it has a lot of uses and maybe needs a bit of definition. So walk us through that a bit, as to kind of when you're looking at, what is the self, or kind of how you define that, what does that look like?
Yeah, so as I dug in, I looked and found that there's an acronym that represents what the self is. And the S stands for strengths. And there's three different areas of strengths that we're talking about. You have your physical strength, you have your mental strength, and you have your emotional strength. And I was like, all right, cool. I can go with that. Like, what are we doing to really, take care of our body? That's the physical part. Then what are we doing for our emotional side, and then what are we doing for our mental side? And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then as I dove into E, that stood for energy. But here's the crazy thing: the three things came up again: physical energy, emotional energy, mental energy. And I was like, okay, that's interesting, because I'm doing research over and over to figure out what this all stands for. L stands for love. Now, what's fascinating, I already mentioned self-love, and that comes up immediately when you talk about love, because I have this, it's not my theory, but if you don't love yourself, how can anyone else love you? And it really does start there on that love side of things. Then we have love for others, and then love for purpose or passion, what we do, to fill our buckets, like you do with Miller IP and all the podcast stuff that you're doing. And then we go to freedom, which is the F in the equation. And freedom, it was fascinating, came back to the same three: physical freedom, emotional freedom, and mental freedom. And so there became these patterns that I'm looking at. And it was like, okay, now how do we attack this? And how do I go help people really fill their bucket, fill themselves up? And so I've created this quiz that I do for people. I have a keynote that I do this on. But the overall idea, to keep it simple, Devin, is to really say, okay, what am I doing for my strength? What am I doing for my energy? What am I doing for my love? And what am I doing for my freedoms? Do I truly have that freedom? And when I see people kind of get this thing clicked on, and they're like, wait a minute, my energy's low. That's not allowing me to win. It's crazy because people can immediately go, well, now I know why I'm not winning in business. Now I know why I'm not winning in my relationship. Now I know why I'm not winning in whatever endeavor of life, and it comes back to one of these four categories. So it's been a fun, deep, cool rabbit hole to go down. And I just love talking about it because I want everybody to live their most authentic, amazing lives. And we can do that if we focus on these four areas.
No, definitely makes sense, and it's a great background and helpful definition to that. Now, kind of one of the things that you touched on among any, or several, is that and we chatted a bit about before before we started the podcast, which is winning often comes from oneself. Now, there's I think in a general sense, without the effort that you put in, without the time and energy, makes sense. It's not going to, come about, or you're not going to have that winning. You're not going to have that success. And yet, you'll also have people that say, hey, you didn't build this. It's, every or business is luck, or success is luck, or it's a right timing, or, it's a combination of a lot of other people contributing and overall. And so kind of help us understand, what aspects maybe those do or don't play into it, and how it really does winning comes from one, or from the self.
Yeah, it's a good point because I hear people say all the time, I'm self-made. Well, I actually don't believe self-made is even possible, right? I never met somebody that is a self-made. You usually hear it in money, self-made millionaire, self-made billionaire. So no one helped guide you along the way at all. You didn't have a mentor, you didn't have a teacher, you didn't have, and so the idea of being self-made, that term, it doesn't make sense to me. But what I would say, specific to collaboration, is when you pour into yourself, it allows you to show up as the best leader, best teammate, best whatever hat that you're wearing. So, for instance, you and I have talked off air, and every time I see the 20 to 24 miles a day of running, I'm like, yeah, he's pouring into himself. He is making sure that his body and his mind and his energy are filled by doing that. And that allows, I'm guessing, Devin, without asking you, but that allows you to fill your bucket so that you're filling from a full cup and not from an empty one. So it is this interesting dynamic where I ask people to take care of themselves first so that they can show up in collaboration with their business partner, with their spouse or significant other, with their kids. Make sure you take care of you so you're feeling great about who you are. Then it allows you to build these really amazing companies or these families or whatever thing that you're into. But it always starts back with what have you done for yourself so you can show up as the best version of you.
No, I definitely would agree with that. Now, if I were to play devil's advocate, push back, whatever you want to call it, I think on the flip side of the conversation, so I'm talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth, I think the inherent negative reaction of, if you say I'm not self-made, is it almost sounds like, someone gives it to you. So you inherited it, or someone else really created it and you didn't really do it yourself. And so it kind of almost feels like it diminishes what you've done or the effort you put into, because typically to build a successful life, successful business, setting things up for how you want it is a enormous amount of time, money, and effort, a lot of sacrifice that oftentimes does come from yourself. And there's a subset of people that are saying, hey, I don't want to go out and do that level of sacrifice. I'm not going to go out and start my own business or build my own thing. Nothing wrong with that. But then they don't have to go through that risk, that sacrifice, and that. And so then, people are saying, well, if you're not saying I'm self-made, or if I'm having to give all the attribution to everybody else in my life, then it kind of makes me feel like I'm not getting the credit of all of that risk and sacrifice. And so how do you kind of go about, in one sense, giving attribution to those that have helped you along or may have contributed or otherwise been beneficial in your life, while still also allowing yourself to recognize, hey, there is a lot of time and effort I put into this, and some of the success I'm seeing may be attributed to what I've done. Any thoughts on how you balance that?
Yeah, it's a great point. So again, when you go back to the word winning, when you look on the scoreboard and you win, do you really care how it went? Do you care if you were the superstar or if your team just won? Most people, it truly, they don't care about who did what. We won the game. That was the ultimate idea. And there's a quote that I think has served me extremely well, both in business and in life. It's amazing what can get accomplished if no one cares who gets the credit. I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt who said that. And it's one of these ideas where if you're able to, again, look inside and say, I'm comfortable with who I am. I don't need somebody to tell me that the accolades that I got up early and worked out. I don't need somebody to do that. I have that internal validation. So I know who put in the work. And that's when you really do start to win. It's when I have to have credit for this, or my ego needs to be fed this way. I'm not saying we don't have egos. We all do. But are you more focused on just getting credit? And so let's say you get all the credit in the world and the company goes bankrupt. Okay, great. Now what? Now you're in financial ruin. And it's like you got all the credit in the world for doing it. You put all the work in, everybody's giving you all the kudos, but you didn't get the end result that you wanted. And so what I coach people to really look at is what's your end goal here? What's your result? do you want freedom financially? And do you want to be able to spend time, freedom, from a time perspective? If that's the case and that gets accomplished, do you really care who gets the credit? Most people, when you ask them that, unless they're really struggling with that ego, they're like, I don't care. Look, if you put $100 million in my bank, I really don't care who gets the credit. And those are some of the examples that you can give to say, if you had this, do you care who got the credit? Most people would say, no, I just want to win in life. I want to be happy in life. It's like, awesome. So let's focus on that.
Yeah, no, it definitely, makes sense. And I think there is, I mean, in reality, everybody has a level of ego. In other words, you do want to get credit. To your point, there's vastly different variety. Sometimes it's, hey, I just want to be credit for part of the team, or I don't really care if I have the money in the bank account, that's my sense of credit. Now, or kind of one or tangent to that, and I know it's kind of taken the conversation off in a bit of a different direction, but the other thing that comes to mind is, what's probably or sometimes more difficult is not just you don't receive the credit, but somebody else receives a credit or for what you did. So in other words, you put in hundreds of hours, built up the business, and somebody that didn't do anything to, at least in quotes, earn it. In other words, they didn't put in the time and effort. They come along and people have perceptions, or they're able to market themselves or sell themselves, and they put themselves out there. Give you an example, and maybe it's correct or not, but your take, let's say Apple. You had really a couple or co-founders. You had Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak. Other than the people that are more nerdy, or maybe they watch the movies or some of that, vast majority of people in the general public don't know who Steve Wozniak is. Certainly know who Steve Jobs is, and yet there is a level of equal or contribution, or at least a large contribution by both, and yet one person in the public eye gets a vast majority of the credit, or really all the credit, and the other person that did or they market themselves, put themselves out there as a front person, that person never gave the other individual credit. They gave or kept it to themselves. And so it's still, in my mind, it seems like focusing on yourself and saying, hey, I got $1 million or tens of millions or hundreds of millions or however much he's worth in the bank. But the person that should be, that I was friends with, that worked hard with, was there from the beginning, took all the credit and doesn't even hardly recognize any of my contribution, still seems like, inherently, no matter how selfless you are, or how much you have in the bank account, having someone just simply take all of what your hard work and not give you any credit is still a hard thing to define, or to not, or to overcome, or to not have a level of resentment to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It'd be interesting to ask Steve Wozniak and say, how does that feel? And I have no idea. To your point, I know Steve Jobs has since passed, and what he would tell you is he had $8 billion in the bank when he was on his deathbed, and he said, I'll give it all back for my health. Right. And I'm not suggesting it was because of any ego thing related, but that was how Steve's life ended. I wonder where Steve Wozniak lands on this, because the truth is he is financially wealthy for generations to come. He didn't have to deal with media scrutiny. Maybe that's exactly what Steve Wozniak wanted, was just to be the genius in the background. And that's where you go back to, what do you really want? Ask yourself that. And maybe Steve Jobs said, I want the accolades. This is important to me. And Steve Wozniak said, you know what, dude? I love being in the background. I'm a fantastic engineer, coder, all the brilliant things that he could do. I don't know. That's where, again, you want to ask yourself, what do I want out of this relationship? Now, to your point, here's the funny thing, and I'll play devil's advocate or speak out of both sides of my mouth for a second as well. I coach people as leaders to make sure to give EPR, encourage, praise, and recognize. Everyone in relationships, they want to feel recognized, seen, heard. So I would tell you, as a business partner, I hope that Steve Jobs says, Steve Wozniak, I love you. You're amazing. I'm so proud of who you are. Maybe he did that. I don't know that dynamic well enough to speak to it, but I will say that it is an important point. Make sure you do have the recognition that you're yearning for. But I do know some folks that they're like, I don't want any public eye. I'll take the money, I'll take the freedom, and just live my life. That's what I want. So I think it comes down to, what do you really want out of that relationship?
No, I think that's absolutely a great point. And it's also one where it probably, and again, you can correct me where I'm wrong. It seems like it's a level of, I hate the it's overusing cliche, but self-discovery, or it's a process or an evolution sometimes for you to figure out what you want. So in other words, sometimes when you're early on in your career, you do want that accolade, you do want that acknowledgement because maybe you're younger, less mature, you are more focused on what others think. And as you get farther on in your career, you're saying, hey, if I'm winning, the business is successful, I'm able to spend time with my family, have a comfortable life, and have the balance I want. I really don't care what recognition I got. So it seems like it's that evolution that oftentimes may occur, and sometimes people are just self-centered or selfless or throughout their whole life. Now, maybe shifting gears just a little bit, because one of the other ones that I thought would be, that you or we talked a little bit about before was, a little bit of that self-development, self-discovery, self-definition. But I think that, going through that, that's an exercise that, if you're going to develop yourself or put time into yourself, it is a lot of time and effort to build probably, and I'm doing it from the business or perspective, but same thing with self-development on the personal, on the family, on the religious side, and all the other aspects. But if you take from the business perspective, there is a lot of, self-development and self-confidence that goes involved with just putting yourself out there, setting yourself up to fail. People, you start a business. It's always funny. There's I don't know if it's a meme or a saying or a post. I, saw it somewhere, and you always see them, and then you forget where it came from. But it was talking about basically, if you go and start to work for a startup, people always find that, be exciting. Oh, that's awesome. Tell me about the startup. And if you say, hey, I started my own business, kind of like, oh, well, good luck. Most startups fail. And, are you sure you want to take that risk? And both of them are equally risky. But if you go out and put yourself out there, start your own business and go from scratch, everybody's watching you. And, there's a lot of times people are not wanting you to fail, but just anticipating that you may fail. So how do you kind of set yourself up to be successful, develop yourself to have that confidence, to have that strength and fortitude to go through it, and, and kind of set yourself up for success? Maybe walk us through that, or any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
man, you so many good things and things to break down in there. Here's what I would say. You only have one person that you're looking at the mirror every single day. You only have to really, I know we're with our spouses. My wife and I have been married almost 20 years. I have two sons that, 18 and 15. But the truth is, I'm not with them every second of every day. I'm with one human being, one self, one thing every day. And when you can really look in the mirror and be okay and love on that oneself, all of the other insecurities and things that you mentioned, because trust me, when you put yourself out there, as you said, starting a business, other people are going to give their own insecurities and fears, and they're going to put them on you. Like, oh my gosh, have you thought about this? I mean, my own family, when I started as an entrepreneur, they were like telling me all the things I should be concerned with. And as much as I appreciate that because they want to care and protect for you, there's only one person I have to live with every single day for the rest of my life, and that's me. So what I would tell somebody to really do is spend time with yourself to figure out what you want. Is it a bunch of money in the bank? Is it financial freedom? Is it freedom to have time? Whatever your thing is. And as you mentioned, I don't care if you're an entrepreneur or you work a 9 to 5. None of that matters because it comes down to what do you want out of life? For instance, my best friend, he works for a company and he makes X amount of dollars and he's completely happy and content. And I love that for him. For him, that specific world, that would be awful for me because we have different goals and aspirations. And so it is this really interesting thing where the more you can sit with you, understand what you want, now you can build your life and design it whichever way you want. So just remember, you have to look at one person in the mirror every single day. You have to be okay with who that person is. You're the one that's filling their bucket. No one else can make you feel a certain way. And when you realize that, life actually starts to become really easy. And to your point, maybe that's an evolution. As we all get older, we kind of get more comfortable in our skin and who we are. But I love seeing people become their authentic selves so early because you see the freedom already, the freedom to speak authentically, to live authentically, to live unapologetically. That freedom is really something that I think everybody yearns for. It's just a matter of discovering what it is that you want.
Makes perfect sense. Now, shifting, and they all go together, but shifting gears because we are wrapping towards the end of the episode, so it feels like we barely just scratched the surface. But one of the other things that, as we talked both before and have gone through this conversation, that comes to mind is, self-reflection or looking at it. When I was in high school, I am still am a introvert now. Difference was is I probably didn't have the self-confidence or the, I don't know, self-esteem or whatever it is that I could just say, I don't really care what other people think. I'm going to do what I think is, right or best or what I want to do. And as long as I can have a successful business, take care of my family, and otherwise, that level of self-confidence really probably wasn't there in high school, wasn't really something I focused on. And I was just kind of the quiet kid, got good grades, didn't really talk with many people. And I probably am still the introvert that doesn't really love to talk with people, even though I do a podcast and talk to clients all the time. Naturally, I'm not there, but it was for me at least an evolution from, probably younger to going through. And I'd probably say a lot of it was going through law school, having to defend your position, having to be called on randomly in class and be, pounded on and to defend your position probably helped to pull out what maybe was naturally there. Now, if you're talking to someone that maybe does look at themselves right or improbable, I was going to say right or wrong, probably wrong, and saying, hey, I don't see that self-esteem. I don't see that self-confidence. And it doesn't have to be that you're an extrovert or bombastic, but the confidence within to do things. If you're not inherently having that, or you're missing that, or hasn't or had time to cultivate or develop any kind of maybe step by step or initial ways that you can start to. I know it's a much longer conversation. Can't fix everything with a 30-second answer, but where do you start, or kind of what are some actionable steps that people can start to approach if they're looking to to engage on that front?
Yeah, it is a big question. So I guess what I would start with is that self-reflection, really looking inward and saying, hey, what do I value? What do I want? So as you mentioned, you kind of grew in confidence maybe through law school because of the speaking. Awesome. And now you do this amazing job at doing this hosting, and you ask fantastic questions and you are confident in who you are. I think the more that people can just sit and understand what their strengths are, what their potential weaknesses are, and then focus on the strengths. For again, let's go back to Steve Wozniak for a second. I imagine his personality was also being an introvert, and staying in the background may have filled his bucket more than forcing him to be on stage. That's okay. You chose a path to say, look, even though maybe I don't love to be gregarious or out there, this is important to my business and my growth. Therefore, I'm willing to put myself out there. There's no right or wrong answer. And that's the beautiful thing about life is there's so many different ways that we can earn a living. There's so many different ways that we can find fulfillment. And there's no right or wrong answer. You only have to do a few things in life. You have to breathe, eat some food, have some shelter, and drink water. Like your basic necessities of life are the ones that you have to do. Everything else is a choice. And I believe if somebody has the freedom to say, I'm okay with being introverted, I'm okay with being shy, I'm okay with being whatever. When you find that freedom, that beautiful just being you, it's amazing how easy life becomes. So I hope that answer makes sense. Again, like you said, it's a big question, but just being okay with who you are, that's the freedom, that's the true beauty that I hope everybody can obtain at some point in life.
No, I think that that's a great way to end off the conversation, at least for this episode, and definitely makes sense on what you walked through. So, well, I always love to wrap up each episode with the same question, so we're going to jump to that now. So within that, the question I like to ask is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth, and why is it wrong?
I'm so the biggest myth. Oh
Yes.
man. In the coaching world, just because somebody's a great marketer does not make them a great coach. And I see these armchair quarterbacks that I say all the time where they're asking people to do something that they've never been willing to do themselves. That would be, maybe that's a myth. Maybe it's just my biggest pet peeve. I met three relationship coaches this last weekend, and none of them were actually in relationships currently, but they're coaching everyone else how to do it. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. So I guess what I would say is because I love coaching, I think coaching is important, but I would ask people to really dig into who these people are. Like the reason I can talk about helping businesses because I built and sold three already. I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't done myself or I'm not doing currently. So maybe that's a myth. It's certainly a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, no, I think that that one, and it's one where, because I have a mixed, I think you do a great job on coaching, otherwise I wouldn't have had you on, but I have a mixed view of coaches in the sense some of them absolutely worth their salt. They do a great job, help people through, help them to reach the next level. And by the same token, it is I'll put in quotes, low bar to start a coaching business. In other words, you just call yourself a coach. Maybe you go take an online class for 30 minutes and you get some sort of certificate, and then you go out and start telling people all the things that you learned in your 30-minute, thing. It's kind of like the thing that always drove me nuts and different tangent on in law school was you'd have all of these professors. They may be smart, they may understand the books, and a lot of them, they would either haven't practiced at all in the legal field or they practiced for a very short period of time. They couldn't hack it or they couldn't do it. And so then what did they do? They went into teaching and they're sitting there telling you how to be an attorney when they really don't have any experience or background or know how to do it. And yet they're telling you all the ways to do it and all the things to do. And it's just kind of one of those where, sometimes I think looking behind, do they actually have the experience, the background? Do they have a area for authority? Everybody starts somewhere, coaches start somewhere, and you can build your experience and your level. But kind of that to that point when you have someone that you don't never been married, never had kids, and telling people how to deal with a marriage that you're having difficulty with, or you're having kids that are going wayward or struggling. It's one of those where you have to, one way or the other, build your experience and build your background so that you can speak from that place of authority. And I think that's a great myth to dispel or one to hit on. Well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people do want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, brother, I appreciate it. So letsgowin.com is the easiest way to find me. You can hit up info at letsgowin.com, info at letsgowin.com. That'll get right to me. And if you're looking for somebody to help build your business with you, because again, I'm not going to ask you to do something I wouldn't do with you. Let me know. I love working with the right people, helping them double, triple their revenue, and I get to do what I love. So, and we can further this conversation on what self is because it's a big one, and I hope more people spend time on it.
Absolutely. Definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, expand their network, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So definitely appreciate you coming on, sharing a lot of great insight, great information. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have some expertise to share, you have a journey to share, we'd love to have you on the podcast series. So just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Well, thank you again, JM, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, brother.